Snow drifted gently across the city streets, covering sidewalks and rooftops in a soft white blanket as Christmas lights sparkled from every building. The evening carried a festive warmth despite the winter chill, and luxury cars lined up outside one of the city's most prestigious hotels. Inside, the grand ballroom glowed beneath towering crystal chandeliers, their golden light reflecting off polished marble floors and elegant holiday decorations. A magnificent Christmas tree stood near the center of the room, decorated with shimmering ornaments, ribbons, and hundreds of tiny lights that dazzled every guest who entered. The sound of a live choir echoed through the hall, filling the room with classic Christmas songs while waiters moved gracefully between tables carrying silver trays filled with sparkling drinks and gourmet appetizers. A sleek black car stopped at the entrance. The driver quickly stepped out and opened the rear door. First emerged Victoria Hayes, the powerful CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing technology companies. She carried herself with quiet confidence, dressed in a deep emerald evening gown beneath a long winter coat. Her reputation was known throughout the business world. Investors admired her intelligence, competitors respected her determination, and employees viewed her as a leader who never accepted anything less than excellence. A moment later, she turned back toward the car and offered her hand with a gentle smile. A young girl of about 10 stepped out carefully, wrapping her small fingers around her mother's hand. Her name was Lily. She wore a beautiful red velvet dress with a white cardigan and matching shoes, her long brown hair tied neatly with a satin ribbon. Around her neck rested a tiny silver necklace shaped like a snowflake, a gift from her mother the previous Christmas. Unlike the other children attending the event, Lily could not hear the music welcoming the guests inside. She had been born deaf, and although she had learned to navigate the world with remarkable courage, gatherings like this always reminded her how different she was from everyone else. While people admired the decorations and listened to the choir, Lily experienced the evening through the movement of lights, the expressions on faces, and the vibrations beneath her feet. Victoria squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly before they entered the ballroom together. Almost immediately, several executives approached with bright smiles. "Merry Christmas, Victoria. It's wonderful to see you. We've been looking forward to tonight." Victoria greeted each of them warmly while maintaining her professional composure. She introduced Lily whenever possible, but many guests simply smiled politely before turning their attention back to business conversations. Some weren't sure how to communicate with a deaf child. Others assumed she wouldn't understand them anyway. None of them intended to be unkind, but their uncertainty created an invisible wall that Lily noticed immediately. She watched groups of children laughing together near the enormous Christmas tree. Their mouths moved rapidly as they exchanged jokes she couldn't hear. Every burst of laughter reminded her that she stood outside a conversation she could never enter without someone willing to meet her halfway. Victoria noticed the disappointment slowly appearing in her daughter's eyes. She knelt beside her and gently signed, "Are you okay?" Lily forced a small smile and signed back, "I'm fine." But Victoria knew her daughter too well. The smile never reached Lily's eyes. The evening continued as photographers captured pictures of influential guests. Flashing cameras illuminated the ballroom while business leaders shook hands, exchanged holiday greetings, and discussed upcoming projects. Everywhere Victoria looked, people admired her success. Yet none of those accomplishments could erase the quiet loneliness she saw in her daughter. As they walked deeper into the ballroom, Lily became fascinated by the towering Christmas tree. She stepped closer, carefully examining every ornament hanging from its branches. Tiny glass angels reflected the lights above, while miniature wooden reindeer, snowflakes, and stars created a magical display. She gently touched one sparkling ornament, smiling for the first time that evening. Victoria watched her from nearby while speaking with members of her executive team. Every few moments, she glanced back toward Lily to make sure she felt safe. Protecting her daughter had always mattered more than quarterly profits or corporate awards. Soon the event organizer invited everyone toward the dining area where beautifully decorated tables stretched across the ballroom. Elegant centerpieces filled with candles, pine branches, and red roses completed the festive atmosphere. Guests found their assigned seats while soft applause filled the room. Victoria and Lily took their places at a table near the front. Around them, conversations flowed effortlessly, but Lily remained silent. She observed smiling faces, moving lips, and occasional laughter without understanding the sound surrounding her. She folded her hands neatly in her lap and looked down for a moment, trying not to let anyone notice how alone she felt. Across the ballroom entrance, another guest quietly stepped inside with his young son, unaware that a single moment of kindness was about to change the entire evening, and perhaps several lives forever. Daniel Parker paused just inside the entrance of the ballroom, brushing a few snowflakes from the shoulders of his navy blue coat before helping his 8-year-old son, Ethan, remove his scarf. Unlike many of the guests arriving in luxury cars with assistants and security, Daniel had driven himself after finishing a long day at work. His suit was neatly pressed but modest compared to the designer outfits surrounding him. He wasn't interested in impressing anyone. He had accepted the invitation because his small construction company had recently completed a community project sponsored by Victoria Hayes' corporation, and several business partners had encouraged him to attend the annual Christmas dinner. Ethan looked around with wide eyes, amazed by the sparkling lights, enormous Christmas tree, and elegant decorations covering every corner of the ballroom. He tugged gently on his father's sleeve and smiled. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Daniel smiled back and rested a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. "It really is." The two slowly walked toward the reception area, greeting a few familiar faces along the way. Although Daniel knew only a handful of people at the event, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Since losing his wife 3 years earlier to a sudden illness, life had changed dramatically. Overnight, he had become both mother and father to Ethan while struggling to keep his small business alive. The journey had been exhausting, but it had also taught him patience, compassion, and the importance of noticing people who often went unseen. As father and son waited near the buffet, Ethan became distracted by the dessert table overflowing with Christmas cookies, chocolate cakes, and colorful pastries. "Dad, can we try those later?" Daniel chuckled. "Only after dinner." Ethan nodded with an exaggerated sigh that made his father laugh. While the guests continued chatting, Daniel's attention wandered across the ballroom. He noticed executives exchanging business cards, photographers capturing holiday memories, and children running excitedly between tables. Then his eyes settled on a young girl sitting quietly beside the towering Christmas tree. She wasn't playing with the other children. She wasn't talking. She simply watched everyone around her with calm, observant eyes. For several moments Daniel studied the scene. He noticed how other children occasionally glanced toward her before running back to their games. Adults smiled politely but rarely stopped to include her. The girl seemed surrounded by people, yet completely alone. Then he saw something familiar. The small hearing aids behind her ears. A memory immediately returned to him. Years earlier, Daniel's younger sister, Grace, had been born deaf. Growing up together, he had learned sign language so they could joke, argue, tell stories, and share everyday moments without barriers. While many people struggled to communicate with Grace, Daniel had always believed that learning her language was one of the easiest ways to show love. Even after Grace passed away in adulthood following a serious illness, he continued using sign language whenever he met someone who needed it. It was his way of honoring the sister who had taught him that silence never meant emptiness. Without saying a word, Daniel looked down at Ethan. "Would you like to come meet someone?" Ethan followed his father's gaze toward the girl. "Sure." The two walked slowly across the ballroom. Nearby, Victoria Hayes was engaged in an important conversation with several board members discussing next year's expansion plans. Although she answered every question professionally, part of her attention remained fixed on Lily, who sat quietly tracing the pattern on a folded napkin. Victoria's heart ached. She had hoped tonight would be different. She had hoped someone would make the effort to include her daughter. Instead, Lily looked more isolated with every passing minute. Just then, Victoria noticed a man and a young boy approaching Lily. Instinctively, she watched carefully. Daniel stopped a respectful distance away. Rather than speaking, he smiled warmly and gently raised one hand. In smooth, practiced sign language, he signed, "Hello. My name is Daniel. May we sit with you?" For a brief second, Lily froze. Her eyes widened in complete surprise. She blinked twice, almost as if she couldn't believe what she had just seen. Then an enormous smile spread across her face. The sadness that had followed her all evening disappeared instantly. She eagerly signed back, "Yes. My name is Lily." Daniel introduced Ethan using sign language while speaking softly so his son could follow along. Ethan copied a few simple signs his father had taught him over the years. Lily laughed. It wasn't a polite smile. It was genuine, joyful laughter that lit up her entire face. Daniel asked about the beautiful Christmas tree. Lily excitedly signed about her favorite ornaments and pointed toward the sparkling snowflakes hanging from the branches. She explained how she loved watching lights because they made Christmas feel magical, even though she couldn't hear the music filling the room. Daniel listened attentively, responding with natural, fluent signs that made conversation effortless. Across the ballroom, Victoria could hardly believe what she was witnessing. For the first time that evening, her daughter wasn't sitting alone. She wasn't pretending to be happy. She truly was happy. Victoria felt tears gathering in her eyes as she watched Lily's hands move rapidly through the conversation. Months of worry, frustration, and quiet heartbreak suddenly gave way to overwhelming gratitude. A stranger had done in less than 5 minutes what dozens of influential guests had failed to do all night. He had simply chosen to speak her daughter's language. And in that simple choice, he had given Lily something far more valuable than gifts, decorations, or an expensive Christmas dinner. He had made her feel seen. As the evening continued, the atmosphere around Lily changed completely. The quiet little girl who had spent the first part of the dinner sitting alone was now smiling so brightly that several guests began glancing in her direction. Her hands moved gracefully through every sentence as she chatted with Daniel, while Ethan watched with growing fascination. Every few moments, Daniel patiently translated a few signs for his son, encouraging him to practice. Ethan eagerly copied the movements, sometimes getting them wrong, which made Lily giggle before gently correcting him. Instead of feeling embarrassed, Ethan laughed along with her, determined to learn. For the first time in a long while, Lily didn't feel different. She didn't feel like the child everyone was afraid to approach. She simply felt like another kid enjoying Christmas. Victoria remained seated nearby, quietly observing the conversation. She had tried countless times to help people understand that communicating with Lily wasn't complicated. All it required was patience and a willingness to learn. Yet so many adults had acted as though the effort was too difficult. Watching Daniel sign so naturally reminded her that kindness was often measured not by grand gestures but by simple actions performed with genuine care. As dinner was served, guests took their seats around elegantly decorated tables. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the chandelier lights while servers placed beautifully prepared meals before everyone. Although conversations filled the ballroom, Victoria found herself paying little attention to the executives seated beside her. Her eyes kept returning to Lily, who was happily signing across the table with Daniel. One executive leaned toward Victoria. "Your daughter seems much happier now." Victoria smiled softly. "Yes," she replied. "Someone finally chose to meet her where she is." The executive looked toward Daniel with quiet admiration before nodding thoughtfully. During dinner, Ethan asked his father an innocent question. "Dad, how did you learn to sign so well?" Daniel looked at his son before answering gently. "My little sister, Grace, was deaf." Ethan had heard stories about his aunt many times, but he never grew tired of listening. Daniel continued, speaking softly enough that only those nearby could hear. When we were children, people often ignored her because they didn't know how to communicate. I didn't like seeing her left out, so I learned sign language. Before long, it became as natural to me as speaking. Lily watched Daniel carefully as he repeated the story for her in sign language. Her smile slowly faded into a look of quiet understanding. She signed, "Your sister must have loved you very much." Daniel smiled warmly. "I think we both helped each other." He paused for a moment before adding another sentence through sign language. "She taught me that the loudest voices aren't always heard, and the quietest hearts often have the most to say." Lily lowered her eyes for a second, deeply moved by his words. Victoria had witnessed countless motivational speeches from successful entrepreneurs throughout her career, yet none had touched her as deeply as that simple sentence. After dinner, the Master of Ceremonies welcomed everyone and thanked the guests for supporting several holiday charity programs. As applause filled the ballroom, Victoria quietly stood and walked toward Daniel. He immediately rose from his chair. "Thank you," Victoria said sincerely. Daniel looked slightly confused. "For what?" Victoria glanced toward Lily, who was laughing with Ethan while decorating gingerbread cookies at a nearby activity table. "For giving my daughter the happiest evening she's had in a very long time." Daniel smiled modestly. "I didn't do anything extraordinary." "You did," Victoria replied. "You saw her." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria took a slow breath. "I've spent years building a successful company. We've developed advanced technology, expanded across the country, and hired thousands of employees. Yet tonight made me realize we've overlooked something important." Daniel listened attentively. "We've never created meaningful accessibility programs for employees or customers with hearing disabilities." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "There are many talented people who simply need someone willing to communicate with them." Victoria smiled. "I'd like to change that." She reached into her purse and handed Daniel her business card. "I hope you'll consider helping us. I'd like you to work with our leadership team to improve accessibility, teach basic sign language workshops, and help us build an environment where no one feels invisible." Daniel looked at the card, surprised. "I'm not a corporate consultant." "No," Victoria replied. "You're someone who understands people. That's far more valuable." Daniel considered her offer for a moment before smiling. "If it helps even one child feel included the way Lily does tonight, I'd be honored." Nearby, Lily looked toward her mother. Victoria smiled and signed across the room, "Everything okay?" Lily beamed and quickly signed back, "Best Christmas ever." Victoria felt tears fill her eyes once again. Not because of expensive decorations. Not because of business success. Not because of holiday celebrations. But because her daughter finally felt accepted without needing to change who she was. As the evening came to an end, guests slowly collected their coats and prepared to leave. Snow continued falling outside, covering the streets in a peaceful white glow. Daniel and Ethan said goodbye to Lily, promising they would see each other again soon. Before leaving, Lily wrapped Daniel in a heartfelt hug. He hugged her gently and signed one final message. "Never believe silence makes you invisible." Lily nodded with a bright smile. "I won't." As Daniel and Ethan disappeared into the snowy night, Victoria watched them from the hotel entrance. She knew the evening had begun as an ordinary Christmas dinner meant to celebrate another successful business year. Instead, it had become something far more meaningful. One man's quiet act of kindness had reminded everyone in the room that true leadership begins with compassion, and that the greatest gift anyone can offer another person is the simple feeling of being seen, understood, and welcomed exactly as they are.